What do I mean by a flipped classroom approach, and how is this going to impact you as a student? So in a typical classroom, students go to school and the teacher lectures, and then students go home and they do their homework. The more active part of learning, the part where you're really engaged with the material, is typically done outside of the classroom and away from the teacher. And then the class time is devoted to taking notes and listening and is a bit more passive, although good note taking shouldn't really be all that passive. This is a typical classroom setting, right? It's probably what most of us are familiar with. In a flipped classroom approach, we switch the two. So students do the more passive part of their learning, whether it's watching or listening to a lecture, reading the materials or a textbook, etc. All of this is done outside of the classroom and outside of class time. And then during class time, the more active part of learning occurs. So this is where the homework would be done with the instructor there to help. In our case, this means that before you start working on your lab assignment, you'll watch any videos. You can watch the videos at whatever speed you need to. You can speed them up, you can slow them down. You can watch them as many times as you need to. You'll also read through your lab instructions before starting. And if there's any supplementary material designed to provide more information, you'll read that. It's also a good idea to write down any questions you have. If there's any content in the lab you learned earlier, but you can't remember it, you can also review it before starting the lab. And then during lab time, whether it's in person or virtual, this is when you'll engage more personally with your fellow students and me, your instructor. You can ask questions to clarify the instructions. You can ask questions about the content. There's more time for one-on-one help with a flipped classroom approach. And then if you're doing the work yourself in the class or virtually, and you run into problems, you have your classmates and your instructor there to help. You can still refer to the videos as needed during the lab time. There's no reason why you can't. But the lab time is spent kind of in a more hopefully engaged type of learning. So a few things to note about this approach. This does not mean you can't ask questions before coming to lab. You absolutely can. You can ask questions at any time. You can also arrive at lab and watch the videos there and then start the lab if you wanted. That's fine too. It just means you'll probably be less prepared than the other students, but that's fine. A flipped approach does not mean that face-to-face time is obsolete or useless. So this approach should not be an excuse to just skip lab because, oh, I won't learn anything. You'll definitely learn something, especially if the material is brand new to you. Because lab time is spent, doing the work and asking questions, we'll probably encounter bugs as we go, or a step of the instruction, isn't as clear as it should be, and we'll work through it together. So in class time or face-to-face time, whatever you want to call it, it's still very valuable. And I still very much encourage you to come to lab, especially if it's material you're not familiar with.